and all certificated staff who serve the students of the Albany Unified School District. And whereas the governing board and superintendent recognize that unique and highly specialized skills are required to meet the varied needs of the young people served by district instructional programs, and are proud of the success that these programs have achieved. And whereas the certificated staff who daily touch our students' lives have a tremendous influence on their hopes, aspirations, and future success, making each student capable of taking up the challenges of life, and not only guide our students academically, but also instill moral and ethical values. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the governing board of the Albany Unified School District proclaims May 4th to May 8th, 2020 to be Teacher Appreciation Week. Be it further resolved that the governing board of the Albany Unified School District encourages all members of our community to join with it in personally expressing appreciation to our teachers for their dedication and devotion to their work.
Thank you very much, Marina. That's a very meaningful resolution.
And so then we have one more piece that we'd like to share. Julie, we have a special video for you this evening.
The educators working with Albany Children's Center are remarkable. They have been faced with an enormous, unprecedented challenge of providing developmentally appropriate distance learning opportunities for Albany's youngest students. They have risen to this challenge and they have delivered with grace and professionalism. I have a deep appreciation for the dedication to the job. These ACC educators have regular communication with their students and families. They are collaborating as grade level and program-based teams. They are providing instructional opportunities using hands-on learning packets, Zoom lessons, recorded activities, educational links, and so much more. This experience reminds me of a quote. Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It is about learning how to dance in the rain. And that is exactly what ACC educators are doing. They are finding creative ways to define distance learning for young children during this pandemic, during this storm. And they are doing a remarkable job. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Melissa Poole. I'm the principal at Marin Elementary, and I want to give a giant shout out to all of our incredible AUSD elementary teachers. In the midst of this pandemic and with no preparation, they've dramatically altered the way that they teach. They've learned new skills, they've offered support to one another, and they've leaned on one another for expertise to find new ways to support our students. They've done all of this in the midst of figuring out how to work from home with their own childcare, family, and health circumstances. They're doing this without the systems of support that are typically in place when we're together at school, and without the positivity and energy that comes from being around all of our wonderful students all day, every day. I am proud to be here with our elementary admin team tonight to cheer our teachers on. Keep up the great work, teachers. We appreciate you.
Good evening. My name is Terry Georgeson, principal at Ocean View Elementary School. I want to first thank Melissa Poole for her wonderful shout out to our teachers here in Albany. You know, Albany is a community that traditionally honors its teachers and educators. And perhaps now more than ever, we should be honoring and thanking them for their focus on continuing to provide the instruction needed for our students. On March 13th, our world was turned upside down. A shelter in place was enacted. And by Monday, teachers were planning, creating, and developing a broad range of supports to help families adjust to their new responsibilities of assisting their children at home to do their learning. Shifting gears to teach remotely from their own home, with many having children at home, is a monumental task. We had a couple goals. offer learning opportunities that are varied and engaging while maintaining skills already learned. At last count, I noted up to 15 various ways teachers were providing instruction. Next, after we were informed that this would be our new normal for the rest of this school year, we worked to reach out to our most vulnerable students. In many cases, our librarians, PE teachers, and other support teachers began to help our classroom teachers, as well as our intervention, ELD, and special ed teachers, by calling, texting, emailing, and even Zooming with individuals who needed that little extra support. These actions taken by our teachers to be the reliable rock that their students are now depending on is so impressive. With each week, our teachers continue to be there for our students and families through office hours, whole class meetings, read alouds, music Zoom classes, tutoring, websites, and Google Classrooms. Our teachers are doing the impossible. Finally, over and over again, teachers are sharing with me their admiration and strong sense of partnership with their parents of their students. This is truly a time when the saying, "it takes a village," has never meant more. It is this village approach, patience, understanding, and partnership that inspires these educators to be such rock stars. Thank you, teachers, for all your work.
Good evening, Albany School Board and community members. I'm Liz Reimuller, the principal of Cornell School, and I want to second what Melissa Poole and Terry Georgeson said about our fabulous teachers. Back in March, they were able to suddenly shift gears to teach remotely, and it's been amazing to see them and the students in action during this period of school closure. In addition, we have been so impressed by the way our teachers are tending to the social, emotional, and mental health needs of our students. Providing a rich and consistent connection to students and their families is essential during these trying times. Now, more than ever, teachers are checking in on their students' well-being through virtual meetings, phone calls, and emails. They are providing encouragement to keep going, permission to make choices and reduce anxiety, technology support to ease frustrations, and certainly they are also referring students to counseling and other support services when needed. And best of all, even though it's a ton of work and takes a great deal of time, these connections support the teachers too, because they truly miss their students and wish we could all be together again. So, cheers to them. We are so grateful for our caring and supportive Albany teachers. Thank you and good night.
I just want to say that if this spring doesn't show how incredibly resourceful, flexible, dedicated, and hardworking our teachers, counselors, librarians, all our certificated staff are, I don't know what will. I've gotten so many positive emails from parents thanking them for all of their hard work and dedication in the midst of all that they're having to manage in their own daily lives. Just want to say a big, big, big heartfelt thank you for always putting your students at the forefront. Thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Darren McNally, high school principal. This is our Certificated Staff Appreciation Week, so I wanted to take a moment to talk about how much I love and appreciate our certificated staff. These members of our faculty work incredibly hard to not only teach students and give them new information, but also to mentor them and help them grow into amazing young adults. Certificated staff has worked even harder as we move to remote learning. I'm so impressed by these professionals who, as soon as the challenges ratcheted up from this unprecedented pandemic, actually kept asking, how can I do better? And everyone has continued to do their very best in the weeks that have gone by. Certificated staff, we see you, we love you, and thank you very much for all you do.
Wow, that was quite a video. I'm so wonderful to see all of our principals giving a shout out to our great teachers. I don't think there's any way that the board can top that, but I'd like to give an opportunity for any trustee to speak if they'd like to, or to simply motion this forward.
Do you have Karen want to say something?
I see our ATA
Clementina's rising.
co-president, Karen DeHart, is on the meeting. Oh, Sarah, go ahead.
I was saying Clementina keeps trying to raise her hand, but you're muted, Clementina.
Okay, no more, right? Okay, I agree. Cannot top what the principals all addressed, but I thought of one thing. Quiero darles las gracias a todos los maestros, los consejeros y todos que apoyen a los estudiantes. Hoy día es bien difícil. Entendemos todo eso, pero queremos darles gracias con todo nuestro corazón.
Yeah, I also
go ahead.
The only reason I was able to understand Clementina just now was because of the wonderful teachers at Albany High School. So just from all the students, you do an amazing job, and the support, especially right now, is unmatchable. So thank you.
I'll just
Go ahead.
I'll just add my thanks, and also say that seeing all these faces reminds me how much I miss all of the teachers and seeing them in person. And I think want to really echo the sentiment that it's not just that creating all of this curriculum online is challenging, it's that you're missing out on, the rewarding piece of being with students. And, it's just been a really heartbreaking time, and it's been really amazing to see teachers try to find ways to creatively connect with students in order just to keep everybody going. Emotionally, I think at this point is the most important dimension that we can provide to each other, and it's been amazing to see teachers find creative ways to do that over a computer, which is incredibly challenging. So thank you.
I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you. Because now our kids are home and we have to try and do the teaching, I already appreciate teachers and everything that they do, but I have an even fonder appreciation for the work that teachers do day in and day out, and the different ways that they keep kids engaged and with the curriculum and things like that. It's a tough, tall task, and you guys do an amazing job of it. And even me as a parent being home trying to teach, they still miss their teachers. They would prefer to have their teachers over their dads. So just thank you for everything that you're doing. I appreciate all the work that you guys are putting in, and all the work that you will continue to do as we get through this together. Thank you.
You have something to say, Kim?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all the teachers for all their hard work. I'm actually going through this myself right now, so I can kind of understand how difficult it is, and I want to thank them for all of their hard work, and give an extra thank you out to my 2 children's teachers. They've been really, really active. Both of my kids and teachers have really, really stepped up, and I want to thank all of them from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
I don't have any new thing to say because it's all been said before, but I truly appreciate all of the teachers throughout my kids' careers in Albany Unified, and especially now in this situation. I wanted to turn it over. I see our 2 ATA co-presidents, Ms. Fujiwara and Mr. Hart. I don't know if they have any comments or anything that they would like to say at this point, but you're welcome to if you'd like to add anything.
Okay, I'll be happy to speak. So on behalf of all the educators that are part of ATA, but also beyond everybody, very encouraging news from all of you, very heartwarming compliments and comments. And of course, we all appreciate it. I think what hits me most is stepping into the role of a student. That's what it feels like to me as we work together to try to figure all of this out. It occurs to me that we miss our students, but we still have a lot of contact. And so that is still super encouraging. Every day, some things don't change. So I feel like my relationship is exhibited differently with my students, but at the end of any session I have with them, it's kind of like being right there with them, and we've adapted. So I would argue that many of us as teachers are working really hard to model the problem solving in a crisis situation like this that we hope our students have, and that they can continue to problem solve in the future for their own benefit and for the good of everyone in their community. And so I think that through this process, we'll be very strengthened by all of this and having to be adaptable and flexible. And so we appreciate everything about Albany, and we continue to work as hard as we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Ms. Fujiwara?
I also just want to say thank you for all of the kind words. It really has been, I never thought we would ever be in a situation that we're in now. It's like a book I read a few years ago, and here we are. And it is, we have shown how adaptable we can be, and students and teachers in a situation where we're all doing the best we can to educate the students, because really that's what it's all about, to really provide the best education for Albany students. And I am humbled to be the elected president of the Albany Teachers Association, of all the hardworking teachers that we have, librarians, psychologists, counselors. I think we've really seen in this situation how everybody can pull together to really make sure the Albany students get the best education they can. So we've been working, with the district office. We've been working with, meeting with district leadership to work together to make sure that we can continue to provide the best education for Albany students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fujiwara. I think that was, all of these statements were incredibly eloquent and so heartfelt. We are indeed lucky to be here in Albany with the certificated staff that we have. And with that, could we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll go ahead, sir.
No, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I make a motion that we approve resolution number 2019-20-22.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion to pass the resolution 2019-20-22 Certificated Employees Appreciation Week passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Brings us to our approval of the consent calendar. Are there any items that need to be discussed on the consent calendar? Okay. If not, then may I have a motion to pass the consent calendar?
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Those were our student board members, Board Member Milan, Board Member Weinstein. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Huh? So the consent calendar passes unanimously. And now we're at our superintendent and board member report item. I'll turn it over to Superintendent Wells for his report.
Thank you, President Trutain. I just wanted to put something visual on the screen so that folks can see my report, and a few of at home can see it and hear it. I just want to talk a moment about our initial response to COVID-19. You heard the detailed report, but it's important to note that we not only have our initial response that was a significant step in the right direction, and I just want to spend a brief moment about an article I read this weekend in the LA Times, where the LA Times were applauding the school district, Fullerton School District, for being so responsive and so quick with making sure they provided distant learning, meaning that by the end of the first week, the school was pretty much up, the school district was up and running with distant learning. And I thought about our response to COVID-19 and how we, the following week, went into action, huddling up with everyone, our team members, our leadership, and our teachers, and just so that we can be up and running the following week. And the applause and the kudos that was given to this exceptional district for doing what we did could have been us described to a T, with an addition of this unwavering spirit to do what was best for kids in Albany. It's the kind of spirit that teachers are not really often recognized in a way they should be. But now I think taking time out today to do that really, really illuminate how much we appreciate our teachers. So my hat's off to our teachers. In terms of our ongoing response, some of the things we're doing here at the district office and with our teachers in our upcoming meeting is we're planning for the reopening of schools for the fall. Yes, I said it, planning for reopening of schools for the fall. And how are we doing that? We're doing that by creating a number of different scenarios. For example, what if we're still, hypothetically speaking, still in shelter in place? What might school look like? And so we're going to have those kind of responses almost in the form of a Q&A, but we starting the planning and going a little further this week. Summer programs, we're dealing with the same kind of scenarios and issues about what are we doing for the summer. And so we're playing with a number of different scenarios and would have answers for each of those scenarios, we're hoping by the end of the week. We are certainly meeting regularly with and collaborating with our unions, ATA. We're meeting with ATA weekly, my leadership team, district leadership team, and ATA leadership and representatives from every school are really working hard to tackle issues together. And I think that's what makes this district very special, because we come together trying to do what's best for our kids. And that's what makes Albany, thanks to our adult leaders, a very, very special place. I even heard from the principal at Albany today about how the student leadership is getting together and playing with a number of scenarios regarding graduation. And myself, along with a few others, met with the high school principal and looking at all the possible scenarios so that we can celebrate our graduating seniors, class of 2020. In addition to that, we as a district office have decided, starting May 1st, to turn on the stadium lights at 2020. That's a military time, 8:20, for 20 minutes every Friday and 20 seconds to honor a particular time for our graduating seniors and let them know they're not forgotten. We're thinking about you all the time, and we find you to be very special. So we're going to start that May 1st up until you graduate from Albany High School. Teacher appreciation, you heard it all today. Our teachers here in Albany are our sheroes and heroes. doing what's best on a regular basis to serve their kids and keeping their kids in the center of attention and our focus. And one of the things that wasn't said that, I'm talking to a number of teachers, and I got to tell you, many of them have shared with me that they're working harder without having their students present than they did when they were present every day. And that's because they want to make sure their students have the very best so that they can have bright futures and they feel part responsible. So I say to our teachers here in Albany Unified School District, I tip my hat to you. Thank you for being so wonderful, and congratulations on this special day. We appreciate you, and we do deeply care for each and every one of you. Thank you for everything you do. That concludes my superintendent report, President Trutain.
Thank you very much. I'll move to my report. I have 2 items. The first is, at our last meeting, I went into some detail about procedural issues. In that statement, I mentioned meeting events from the March 10th meeting and the March 24th meeting. I implied that there had been an effort to table an action item, the release non-reelect of temporary certificated employees, by Board Member Clark. That was incorrect, and I make sincere apologies to him. Member Clark asked that the item be moved from review and action to review and discussion. By saying that I believed that item should be presented and discussed before any motion to table, I created a misunderstanding that Trustee Clark was against discussion, when in actuality, discussion was exactly what he was asking for. Secondly, I spoke about how there was a request to reopen discussion about the reduction of a resource teacher at Albany High School at our March 24th meeting. This request was also made by Trustee Clark. Although my intention was to clarify that his request did not constitute a motion to reconsider, I was not clear enough. Trustee Clark did not make a motion to reconsider. The item returned to the board as a regular item, not as a motion to reconsider. I want that to be perfectly clear. In retrospect, any discussion of procedure should have taken place at a board workshop for that purpose. I regret creating any confusion or any impression that Trustee Clark requested anything except appropriate discussions of the issues we face. And I apologize again to Trustee Clark. Now, my second item is about a Zoom meeting that I was a part of late last week with Senator Nancy Skinner's education staff. This meeting was attended by the board presidents in many of the districts that are in Senator Skinner's region. And I was able to hear these board presidents discuss all of the challenges that their districts were facing. And it was a long list of challenges. I would say in many of our neighboring districts in Alameda County, they're not been able to contact and engage their students. Many districts have a big problem with their students being able to have the equipment and the online access to access distance learning. They've also are facing challenges with their special ed education, with loss of income because of the COVID pandemic, and the senator staffers were very responsive in making lists of items that they hope to bring to Senator Skinner's attention to see if we can't get some help for the schools. We hope that the staff will be willing to have monthly meetings with school board trustees on an ongoing basis so that we can continue to stay in touch with our folks in Sacramento as this goes on. So that concludes my update. Thank you. Vice President Durong.
Good evening, everyone. My report comes in the forms of a request. And I didn't actually talk to the superintendent, so I apologize beforehand. I actually was thinking about this and realized, um, it's been very surprising how we haven't, the board members, as a board member, I haven't heard that much from parents and students. In particular, the parents sending us letters raising concerns. It seems everybody's tightened their belt a little bit and is just really, trying to be as strong as possible during this situation. But I was wanting actually to hear from more parents and hear really from the students. And my request, and I'll be willing to help, however, if this request is even possible, to have a survey developed that would go out to the students. 5 questions. What's working for the students? What's not working? What's something that could be improved? Just one thing that would improve things for you. A question that the students could certainly develop about a mental health thing. How are you really managing through this on distance learning? And then something that you had already mentioned about proms and graduations. If there's something students really want to contribute in terms of an idea to making that a reality. And then I also wanted to maybe hear just one comment from parents regarding how the district, how all of us could make online learning better for their kid. Just one single comment that we could compile and go through and see if, through all these ideas, some of them might be very feasible, reasonable, and would make life better for everybody. So we'd have to continue this conversation, I know.
I think that leadership can definitely work with the students to develop a survey and kind of go through that, because I know Dr. Wells and everyone else is really busy right now.
Thank you. Super.
Thank you, Vice President Durand. Trustee Doss?
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to kind of highlight some of the things that we've been talking about, but just as reminders that, we do have the breakfast and lunch being served Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please, if you have children in need, please go and pick up food there. I've been personally going and picking up food and delivering it to families that aren't able to leave their homes. So if that is something that is that you need help with, or that you're unable to actually leave the house, but you still need food, please reach out to the district. Let us know. We'll figure it out. Those families reached out. We were able to schedule something for them. So it just reminded me to mention that district-wide. Please let us know about that. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, 11 to 1 p.m. At the high school gym. And there's been volunteers there, and it's been great. Each time I go, I see somebody different helping out. It's just amazing. Also, this is a really tough time, so I just wanted to remind families out there that there are counseling services available. So also please reach out if you're having a tough time dealing with what's happening. Let us know so that we can make sure to get the resources to you that you need to help you through this. You're not alone. We're all in this together. So please let us know. And I just wanted to also and I know that it's not an easy topic, but if you know somebody that is struggling or not having or doesn't have what they need in order to participate in distance learning, please reach out, let us know so that we can address those concerns as well. You might have a neighbor or someone close to you that needs additional help. Please, let us know. We will make sure to reach out to them and get them the resources that they need. We want to make sure that every student has and every family has what they need in order to make it through this tough time. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Board Member Clark?
Yeah, I just want to start off and I want to thank President Chutain for her apology and for her service to our students and families. And also, I want to thank our students, parents, teachers, and the entire AUSD staff for doing an excellent job during these trying times. And lastly, I just wanted to say thank you once again to the Albany Unified School District family. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Hinckley?
I'll echo some of the thanks, but be very brief about, thanks to the teachers and students and families. I think that what this moment has highlighted is that most of us fit into multiple groups there and are suddenly forced into juggling a lot of different roles, all within the confines of our homes. So it's a challenging time that I want to honor. I also want to just, my own experience of the last couple of weeks has been recognizing the role that uncertainty plays in our overall stress level. And as a school board member in particular, and administrator, I think I think people often imagine that we have a much clearer picture of how the future is going to unfold here. And I'm sure I wasn't the only person who was taken completely by surprise by the governor today suggesting that schools might reopen in July. So I think that highlights the degree to which we're getting information, in the same formats, often off the cuff or in very surprising and incomplete ways. And it's tremendously difficult, as a board member who only has to think about the policy implications of this. I can only imagine as an administrator or teacher trying to understand what school is going to look like 3 or 6 months from now. So I just, I know that we're all doing our best to plan with the information that we have, but that information is evolving on, at this point, almost a daily basis. And I think it's important for the public to know that we don't have really any more answers than somebody can get listening to these briefings, which is unsatisfying, but I don't know if it's worse or better to imagine that we have more information than the public, but I think the reality is there's just not a lot of clarity about how this is all going to unfold. So that's my summary of where we're at as a sort of where I'm at as a governing actor in this environment. I will also just add, I love the idea of the high school lights, even as someone who can see them from my house. And I think I echo, what a lot of other board members have said about being willing to help out and chip in on anything that may seem even, trivial or silly when it comes to figuring out how to honor the students who are missing out such an important experience. Not just the graduation ceremony, but the unfolding of those last few weeks of high school. So I look forward to hearing about how we're going to celebrate all of you guys.
Thank you very much to all of the trustees. That was a really interesting and information-rich set of updates. And that moves us directly to the student board member updates. So take it over, guys.
Thank you. So Ms. Ritchie brought this up to me, but an Albany High School student, Minju O'Rourke, who's a junior, has begun a Albany Community COVID-19 donation campaign. And this is in partnership with the Alameda County Food Bank. So it's a money drive, but the money goes towards food for those in need. So far, a total of $9,015.41 has been raised by the Albany community, which is really amazing. And this is by different clubs at AHS, and each school has their own section. So the link for this can be seen in the minutes under the student board member reports. So yeah, it's really amazing what's been done with that by the community.
Yeah,
Also, as most of us already know, Albany High School has moved to a pass-fail system, with 60% being the threshold for passing a class. An important distinction is this is a pass, no pass. Excuse me, I misspoke. It's a pass, no pass system rather than pass-fail system. So the difference on your transcript is that if you don't pass a class, rather than it showing up as failing the class, it's just taken off of your transcript, which I know is a really big relief for a lot of students. And it's in compliance with what most of the colleges that students may be going to next year have said. Many colleges have said that, you know, they're willing to not look at grades for this semester, just given the crazy times that we're all in. And so I know that that's going to be a really big help for most students. And it's a really difficult time for students. Seniors are missing out on their senior year, second semester, which is, you know, the fun one. And all other students are missing out on the social time and also in-person curriculum and the social interactions that happen every day. So it's a hard time, and I know that this will be a relief for many students, and especially a good way to try and level out the playing field as much as we can right now, because right now inequalities really show through. And so this is a great way for our school district to be able to work towards relieving some of that stress for families and students. And that's it for today.
Thank you. Okay. That concludes our reports and moves us to item 11 on our agenda, persons to address the board on matters not on the agenda. And this is a public meeting, and we do have a public comment that came to us via email, which I will now read. And this person, I wanted to identify themselves. This is from Kelly Callahan, a Marin parent. She says, I would like to bring to the board and district's attention significant concerns about the delivery of special education services during this distance learning time, and the letters dated April 16th, 2020 and April 17th, 2020, sent to parents and/or guardians of Albany Unified School District students with IEP. I have emailed a more detailed letter to the board, the superintendent, and the director of special education, but for public comment, I will summarize my concerns. While I am truly appreciative of the communication and check-ins with our child's resource specialist, I am disappointed and confused by the district's failure to develop an approach more in line with the requirements of special education law, which has not been waived during this distance learning time. I am aware of many privileges that I and my family have, and I feel compelled to speak out also on behalf of those parents who may not be aware of their rights or be able to make sense of the notice of procedural safeguards we were all sent. It appears to me that the law still requires districts to provide a free and appropriate education and follow IEPs to the greatest extent possible during these circumstances. Best practice guidelines and even the advice of Albany's special education defense law firm suggests that districts create individual service delivery plans that reflect the types of services and supports determined to be necessary in the IEP, albeit with different frequency, location, and method. The law states that parents and guardians must receive notice of this individual service delivery plan with as much specificity as possible. AUSD's letters referenced above did just the opposite by making a unilateral, non-individualized, and non-specific announcement that students with disability services will change, opening AUSD up to potential legal challenges on all three grounds. I am further deeply disappointed that Albany has not adopted virtual delivery of specific academic instruction. The law says that districts should be delivering IEP services to the extent feasible. Other districts have found ways to deliver individualized learning plans and specialized academic instruction remotely. I have found and supplied resources and attached an example to my letter of ways that other districts have created processes to deliver services, track progress, and communicate collaboratively with parents in this process. I do not understand why all district has not done the same or why it would not be feasible. I hope that our district acts quickly and takes steps to remedy this so that this vulnerable population does not fall even further behind their peers during this difficult time for all. Okay. So I want to thank Ms. Callahan for her public comment. This is a public meeting, and public comments will appear in our minutes. And that brings us to our item 12, review and action. And we have item 12-1, the academic calendar for 2021-2022 and 2022-2023. I'll hand this item over to our personnel coordinator, Ms. Gonzalez.
Thank you. So this item is, this is something we bring every year where we are approving the academic calendar for not next year, but the following year. So we try to have it board approved by June 30th of the previous school year. But this year it's a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different actually, and it's actually pretty exciting, I think. As it states in the background, the district meets with our different bargaining units to gather input on the academic calendar. And the calendar, though, it's stayed the same really for many, many years in terms of when we take our breaks and when we start, usually in the last week of August, and where our staff development days are and so on. And it's been consistent that way for many, many years. And this year, though, we did a slightly different approach. At the direction of the board that was given at the end of last school year, we put together a task force made up of representatives from the bargaining units, but also parents and principals and mental health specialists and students, high school students, and reviewed some similar data and information that we've looked at in the past, but really it was a lot more comprehensive. There were surveys that were conducted at the beginning of the year for parents, and then again, the same survey was put out to staff. We looked at, we took that feedback and looked at attendance, like attendance trends, you know, around certain holidays and around certain times of the year and so on. And it was really a lot of information that was reviewed at this task force. And at the conclusion of that, the task force developed 3 draft calendars to bring to the board. But through that work, what the task force decided to do was, rather than just bring a 1-year calendar, thought it would be in the best interest to bring a 2-year calendar and 3 drafts of that. And that report and those drafts were presented at the November 19th, 2019 board meeting. And the board voted to move all 3 of them forward for HR to take into negotiations with ATA. So we did just that, met with ATA a few times, and their unit voted on the proposal that they, well, the one that they liked best. And so what we have here is proposal number 2. In proposal number 2, the biggest sort of major changes here are that the start of school is moved up to the 3rd Tuesday in August, that there's a full week break at Thanksgiving, but that it still preserves the midwinter break in February. And school will end about a week earlier than it usually does. So ending the first Friday in June. And so you'll see that over the course of both years. And so I left some of those like descriptions that were in the proposal so that, you know, it looks exactly like what you saw at the November 19th meeting.
Okay. Board, do you have any questions?
Are there
Ms.
any questions?
Well, I'll start us off. I have something to say. To me, the most important part of this calendar is what it lists in December, which is it lists having finals before the December break. And I think that's a huge benefit for our students. And hopefully this will provide them a true break at that time. And it has taken years of effort to get any movement on the calendar. And I think it was done right this year. The calendar task force was very devoted and did a lot of research and looked at a lot of different districts and looked at academic research as well. And they had, you know, all of the stakeholders were at the table. And I think that's what enabled us to move this forward. And to me, this calendar is an example of truly keeping students' best interest first. I want to thank everybody involved in this proposal. And I would suggest reconvening a similar calendar task force in the future to prepare the next set of calendars. So, and there is a public comment. I do want to bring it back to the board for board comment, and then I have a public comment to read.
Yeah, I have something to say, Kim.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to second everything that you said, and also I wanted to thank the members of the Wellness Committee. It's something that people have been working on ever since I've been on the board, and I've heard they've actually been at this for even longer. So I wanted to thank them as well, and good job to staff and the unions coming up with such a wonderful calendar.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to see this calendar. It's exciting to know that students in the future are going to be able to have a winter break where they're not studying. I know that's a really big concern for a lot of the students now, and so it's nice to see that that isn't going to be there in future years. And it's also really nice to see that Thanksgiving is a whole week. I know that we had talked about losing some attendance those 2 days before Thanksgiving. I think someone had said, it might have been Mr. McNally, that there actually aren't that many absences, but still it'll be good to get some more students in school while school days are going on. And I also know that Shelley Ball was really involved with this process for a long time, and that she's put a lot of work into it and has been pushing for it for years. And so I wanted to shout her out and say thank you to her and all the other people who have worked on this, because it is super helpful. And coming from a student's perspective, it's going to be really amazing to be able to get that winter break really just as a break.
I'll read the public comment, which is from Shannon Huffaker, who is a key member of the task force. She states, I'm writing to support the adoption of the new calendars for 2021, 22 and 2022-23 chosen by the Albany Teachers Association. I would first like to thank the Board of Education for establishing a calendar committee composed of representatives of the many stakeholders involved in this issue. As a member of the committee, I can testify that the committee members, who were parents, teachers, counselors, administrators, and students, spent many hours researching, reporting, and brainstorming ideas to improve our current calendar. I would also like to thank the members of ATA for voting to accept one of the options presented by the committee. It has always been clear that Albany teachers put the needs of their students above all competing interests, and ATA has demonstrated this yet again by being willing to make a change in order to prioritize mental health for our kids. I would urge the Board of Education to adopt the new calendar chosen by ATA, Further, I hope the board will adopt the 2-year calendar. Not only does planning for 2 years at once give school staff and families the ability to plan ahead, but it also gives us a real chance to try the new calendar before negotiating possible changes. Change is never easy, and no compromise is ever going to please all parties. However, the calendar options presented to the ATA were the result of extensive time listening to stakeholders, looking at data, and reviewing options from around the state. ATA members have voted and chosen an option that will work best for teachers and students. I thank the board for creating a robust process and urge the board to follow through and adopt the new calendar. Thank you, Shannon Huffaker. So I move it back to the board. And actually, I want to ask Trustee Clark, would you care to make a motion on this item?
Yes, I'm just looking, I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2-year calendar.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. The motion to accept the calendar proposals passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. Oh. Yay. Right. And we move now to item 12-12, Declaration of Need for Fully Qualified Educators. Ms. Gonzalez?
Thank you. So this is another one that comes up every year. This is called the Declaration of Need. This is formally, we have to submit this form called the Declaration of Need to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing via the Alameda County Credentialing Office. And both have to have this board approved document on file. And it needs to be on file by June 30 of the previous school year. And what this does is it allows us to apply for emergency permits, specifically the emergency permits that are listed on the form, as well as it's been expanded. We can also apply for limited assignment permits. And so the emergency permits are, as listed, they are KALB, which is an authorization to teach English learners, resource specialists, and teacher librarians. And with the teacher shortage, that's been going on and affecting California and really the nation for some time, some of, I guess, emergency permits are being expanded. There are more and more emergency type permits. And so one of those is also called a limited assignment permit. So this form also lists limited assignment permits as needing to have this document on file in order to request one of those. And so on page 2, the emergency permits, these are many times what we see here is folks haven't yet obtained their English learner authorization. And so in order to be properly credentialed, we apply for an emergency permit, and they have the 2 years, I believe, to complete the coursework and or the testing to get the authorization. Anymore, most of in the California teaching credentialing programs, that's built into the program now, but before it wasn't always. And so it's sort of phasing out in terms of the California teachers that are trained in California needing these. But we do still see it sometimes when we're hiring from out of state, that it hasn't been built in and they just need to obtain this. And so that's the one that we use most of, if ever. Under the limited assignment permits, this is for folks who already have a full credential, but are seeking to teach in another area. So they might have a single subject and they want to teach multiple subjects, vice versa, and then also in special education. So this allows them to be properly credentialed and covers them while they complete the coursework to obtain that second credential. And the numbers here, I should explain that we list that we need 10 of each or 15 of each, that we might have a need for that. And that we never get to those numbers, but we just give ourselves lots of wiggle room so that we don't have to bring this form back again if we find that we need more. So if we were to list 2 or 3, and then we found that we needed 4 or 5, we would have to go through this process again. So, so that's the declaration of need. Do you have any questions?
If there are no questions, may I have a motion?
I move we approve the declaration of need for fully qualified educators.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion to approve the declaration of need for fully qualified educators passes unanimously. 09. Our next item is 12-3, Resolution for 2019-20-23, reduction of classified services. Ms. Gonzalez, this is also your item.
It is. So this item, well, this is an item, unfortunately, that we also have to bring on an annual basis. This is to reduce certain classified services, positions that are being funded through categorical funds, or what we call soft money, which means this is funding that is not guaranteed every year. It varies, and it is funded through donation groups, right? So we have, I gave examples in the backup of school care or Albany Athletic Boosters. In other years, there are other donation groups that also fund positions. We've had PTA, we've had Albany Music Fund. It just varies from year to year, you know, what organizations are donating to fund positions. And unfortunately, because that funding is not guaranteed from year to year, we do have to go through the process of reducing those positions. And should that funding return, those employees who are in these positions have rights to return to those positions if they're funded again. But until we know for certain that the funding is going to come through, we do have to go through this process of laying it off. So that's what you're seeing in the resolution here, that we are reducing 3 classifications, specifically the library technician classification, of which there are 2.5 FTE across the 5 school sites, the athletic clerk position, which is a 0.733, and it's shared, it's mostly at the high school, but I think does some work at the middle school, and the paraeducator instructional. There are 2 positions that make up this FTE, and those are at 2 of the elementary sites. And that's pretty much what this item is about. Do you have any questions about this item?
I'll start us off by one question, and we do have some public comment on this as well. Can you describe the funding for the paraeducator? That's the 0.4?
Yes. So it's actually, it breaks up into 2 positions. One of them is a 0.2 and the other is a 0.213. The 0.213 is a math intervention position or dedicated to math intervention. It is, this year it's being funded by School Care. School Care allocated a dollar amount to each of the school sites specifically for math intervention. And at Ocean View, this is how the site opted to fund or to spend those monies. And so this position actually just started in February, I believe. So it's only for one semester because that's what the amount of money that was allocated could afford to fund, if you will. The other point too is a paraeducator position that is dedicated to ELD intervention, and that is at Marin. And that is funded through the allocation that the site receives. They receive some site funds that each year they decide how they want to spend those monies. And in this case, it was decided that they would like to spend those monies on ELD intervention para support.
Thank you very much. Trustees?
I'll just say this reiterates the importance of our community supporting School Care, which we just has been trying valiantly to publicize their fundraising efforts in a climate in which they can't deliver materials in person. So I just want to thank them again for funding these positions repeatedly, and hope that we're able to restore them in the fall when School Care has made their funding decisions.
Other trustees? Okay. If not, I'll go ahead and read the public comment. Trustee Hinckley's gave me a great segue to this public comment from Yael Bloom, the president of School Care. She writes, "Dear AUSD School Board, each year School Care meets with the district leadership, principals, PTAs, site councils, and other community members to guide the School Care Board of Directors on the coming year's needs and priorities. These meetings provide School Care with information regarding the finances of the district, positions that may be eliminated or decreased, and the costs of these positions and programs. In addition, typically the School Care Board surveys teachers, parents, and middle and high school students regarding site needs and priorities. This collaborative process guides the School Care Board in the decision-making process and the allocation of funds for the positions School Care supports for the coming school year. This process begins in January and continues through June, when the board makes its first and largest funding allocation to the district. In some years, a second allocation is provided to the district in August based on the additional funds raised over the summer. We may consider delaying our first allocation until the end of June after receiving our final district invoice. This year, School Care fundraising has been delayed and reduced. The shelter in place began the very weekend that our 35 volunteers were set to distribute the spring brochure to every home in Albany. Although we have shared the brochure electronically with AUSD families, we have not been able to distribute it to the entire community. We do not know when and if we will be able to share this important source of information. At this time, School Care funding is down almost $90,000 compared to 2019, a banner year, and about $49,000 from 2018, a more typical year. We have begun to fundraise and will continue to engage our community in raising funds to support staff at all sites for 2020-2021. We will work closely with the sites to determine the highest priority positions for our students and to maximize donations. While we are committed to work hard to fundraise this spring, we do not anticipate being able to support all of the positions that we have funded in the past several years. We welcome any opportunities to partner with the district and the school board. Best, Yael Bloom, President, School Care Board of Directors.
Yeah.
In addition, there is a public comment from the Albany Athletic Boosters. They were very succinct. Dear board members, I wanted to confirm that yes, the Albany Athletic Boosters is planning to provide the payroll funding for the athletic director clerk, athletic department clerk position in fall. This will be the same AAB funding as previously provided. The only contingency will be if the plans for fall athletics change, e.g. season is canceled, etc. But this is unknown at this time. If the position is in place, we will fund. Please let me know if you would like any additional information. Thanks and best regards. Go Cougars. Yeah. So I bring this resolution back to the board.
I'll move that we approve resolution 2019-2023, reduction of classified services.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No. The resolution for reduction of classified services passes unanimously. And I know that everyone, I think I speak for all of us, that we sincerely hope that we will be able to bring back these positions, and it's just hard times right now, which we're all feeling. Okay. We'll progress to our next item, 12-4, Resolution 2019-20-24, affirming support of California Assembly Bill 2016 Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Draft. Actually, I'd like to hand this over to Vice President Durand to run this item.
Thank you, President Trutain. I'm really, really honored and feel very privileged to present this resolution to the board tonight. I'm more than honored. I'm so excited to do this because this is very dear to my heart. Because 50 years ago, I have to tell you, ethnic studies classes changed my life and gave me a voice. I'm kind of emotional. 50 years later, it's fascinating to me. Also, currently, there's an instructional quality committee at Sacramento that is reviewing this draft, this model curriculum draft, going through it, revising it to the degree that's necessary, et cetera. And I had an opportunity to listen to one of their meetings in October, November. And I heard some of the members of that committee tell their stories about how they had taken these classes. And I was just so fascinated because there was such pride in their voices, how they talked about how ethnic studies classes had also impacted on them. So it truly does things for us in a besides an academic emotion way. It's also very emotional, and one of the truths of the matters is that 51 years ago, we students of color at UC Berkeley, we stood up and fought for a curriculum that at that time didn't exist. And when you get a curriculum where you really connect to it, that makes all the difference in the world. Fast forward it today, and we know that Albany is very unique in that it's one of a select number of high schools in California that already offers an ethnic studies course. And I understand that the classes are full always at in Albany High. And I think that speaks also to the values that Albany has, which is believing in diversity, inclusion, and equity. And that's what this model curriculum does. It addresses these issues, and I'm hoping that tonight there will be support for this curriculum to allow not only Albany students, but all students in California the opportunity to take such a course. Okay, so with that, I'd like to see if we could pull up the actual resolution. And Sarah had volunteered to help me read this resolution. Are there any other trustees that would like to help us out?
I would.
Oh my God.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'll grab a short paragraph if there are any left.
Okay, wonderful. Michaela, do you want to start?
Sure. Albany Unified School District Board of Ed Resolution number 2019-2024, affirming support of California Assembly Bill 2016 Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Draft. Whereas in fall of 2017, Albany High School offered its students a new semester course in ethnic studies, and I don't know who'd like to go next.
Let me jump in there. And whereas students from a variety and mixture of ethnic and racial backgrounds make up approximately 65% of the student population in Albany, and approximately 40% of the students have a home language other than English. And
whereas Albany Unified School District has a commitment to diversity, inclusion, equity, and
whereas research indicates that ethnic studies curriculum in high schools has demonstrated an increase in GPA across disciplines, high school graduation rates, college going rates, and a sense of belonging. And
whereas studies show that ethnic studies curriculum helps to narrow the achievement and opportunity gaps for students of color, as well as benefit white students. And
whereas ethnic studies enhances equity in the school curriculum, and
whereas California Education Code Section 51204.5 prescribes the inclusion of the legacies of ethnic and cultural groups who have contributed to the history, economic, political, and social development of California and the United States, with particular emphasis on portraying the roles of these groups in contemporary society. And
whereas California Assembly Bill 2016 Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum is currently in process at the California Department of Education. And
whereas the current California Assembly Bill 2016 Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum draft has vast support from communities of color and intergenerational recognized ethnic studies educators and leaders across California and beyond. And
whereas California has one of the largest and most diverse student populations in the nation, with 77% identified as students of color.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Albany Unified School District affirms support of the current California Assembly Bill 2016 Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Draft.
Be it resolved that the ethnic studies model curriculum keep the disciplinary language framing, guiding values, principles, and outcomes of the field of ethnic studies.
Be it further resolved that Albany Unified School District affirms support for the continuation of Pacific Islander Studies and Arab American Studies course outlines and the representation of West Asian American Studies, all under Asian American Studies, as well as Central American Studies under Chicano and Latinx Studies in the Ethnic Studies model curriculum.
Be it further resolved that we support the work of the Save California Ethnic Studies Coalition in bringing together the experts to address any potential issues and moving the curriculum forward.
And at this point, I think we need to vote. Can we have a motion?
Clementina. This is your baby, but you're muted.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. I move that we approve Resolution 2019-2024, affirming support of California Assembly Bill 2016, Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Draft.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. The motion to approve the resolution affirming support of the California Assembly Bill 2016 Model Ethnic Studies, Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Draft is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Yay.
Thanks to our own intergenerational ethnic studies leader.
Yes.
Bravo.
Yes. Definitely. Okay. Yeah. And that brings us to item 12-5. We have yet another resolution, Resolution 2019-20-25, designation of applicant's agent resolution for non-state agencies. And I think that CBO Kim is going to handle this item.
Thank you, Board President Trutain. This item is to cover our revenue loss due to COVID-19 pandemic. So California Office of Emergency Services requires this resolution for the purpose of obtaining the FEMA reimbursement under the COVID-19 pandemic. So we ask the board this evening to approve the resolution number 2019-2025, designation of applicants agent resolution for non-state agencies. Any questions? If you have, I'll try to answer those questions. And the resolution, Julie, if you can pull up the actual resolutions, thank you.
Okay. I'm sure that we're all interested in receiving whatever the FEMA money we can. Board, do you have any questions, or feel free to make a motion?
I make a motion that we approve resolution number 2019-20-25, designation of applicants agent resolution for non-state agencies.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? The resolution passes unanimously, and hope that we get a lot of reimbursement. Okay. Now we're on to item 12-6, proposal from SDA Architects to prepare a seismic mitigation program funding submittal for Ocean View Elementary School. Mr. Borrego, would you like to take this item?
Yes. Good evening, Board President Trutain and distinguished board members. This item is before the board, asking to review and approve a proposal that's been submitted by SBA Architects of Oakland to provide a needed services for approval of either a phase 2 or phase 3 pre-application that's going to be submitted to DSA for SMP funding. There is 4 phase steps to this process. Phase 1 was already completed by the district that went to DSA as well, which established that the Ocean View Elementary project is eligible for SMP funding. The next step of this funding process is to submit an evaluation and design criteria report, of which SBA will identify the existing seismic systems and propose seismic upgrades with cost estimates for DSA to determine the program eligibility. Once DSA reviews the report, it determines which phase this project falls under. It will be either phase 2, which is replacement, or phase 3, rehabilitation. A phase 2 designation is given when the estimated cost exceed 50% of the replacement cost. Or phase 3 is rehabilitation, and that is given when the estimated upgrade costs are less than 50% of the replacement value. Once they review it, as like phase 1, DSA will concur and provide a letter of approval, which then means that the district is eligible to submit a funding application to the Office of Public School Construction in order for the actual funding. Now, I must note at this time that if it is submitted to OPSC, it is and approved, it is 50% matching funds, the actual funding. We received proposals from 3 architectural firms, one from WLC, which was $167,000. We received one from DCA of San Jose for $99,000. SBA submitted 2 proposals. One proposal is for phase 2 cost, which came in at $76,000. Phase 3 cost, it came in at $84,000. So once they complete the report, it determines which phase it falls under, then the applicable proposal will then apply. These will be paid by the Measure B bond, and it will not exceed $84,000. Any questions?
I have kind of a quick question, Mr. Borrega. Were either the AMS Annex or the high school edition eligible for this kind of reimbursement funding? Can you touch on that?
Yes. At the high school edition, because it was constructed where an amphitheater once existed, it was not eligible for funding because it needed to replace or rehabilitate an existing building. As far as the AMS Annex, my understanding that there was no buildings there, which it fell under the same criteria where it was not eligible.
Okay, well, it's very good to know that we haven't missed any opportunity, that the first project that we have with our construction bonds B&E, that we have the possibility of getting some of this 50% match that we're going forward and applying for it. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the board?
I had a brief question, which was in looking at all this, it takes a lot of time, right, to get it all together, to send it to Sacramento, to wait for DSA approval, etc. And so my question is basically, given all the work you have done, and still waiting for approval, are we still sort of on our timeline
Yes, this funding will not affect the construction schedule because of the time involved. We will basically be reimbursed in the future.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I can make a motion if there aren't any other questions. I move we approve the proposal from whoa, you moved my, oh yeah, there you go. The SBA architects to prepare a seismic mitigation program funding submittal.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The motion passes unanimously. Let's
Thank
keep our
you.
fingers crossed. And now let's move on to item 12 dash. Oops, no, that's the end of our review and action. Now we come to our review and discussion. The first item, 13-1, is role and purpose of Budget Advisory Committee. CBO Kim, would you like to start this item, please?
Sure. Thank you, Board President Trutain. So at the recent board meeting, the board requested we will discuss the purpose and the role of the Budget Advisory Committee for the district. So we are here this evening to open up for the discussion for the board, and if we have any public and then also Jessica Cross, the president of the BAC, is here this evening and joining us as well. Let's see.
I have a question.
Sure.
Ms. Kim, CBO Kim,
Yes.
I had asked about what your opinions were, and I was real surprised by your response, including the fact that LCAP has a very strong process already developed, and there was a comment here that possibly it could be merged somehow. The whole budget question could be merged with LCAP. Is that correct?
Yes. So this is the item that right, we have discussed, and that is one of the possibility. And it will be very similar process with what we are also looking to see at for BAC, and also what we have currently for LCAP process.
So oh, just to clarify, I'm sorry, is it more, so you're looking more at the process, not the idea of somehow merging these two committees? Is that correct?
So I guess we are open up for a discussion this evening. So maybe there might be a possibility that we can either merge or we can write.
Okay, thank you.
Would Ms. Cross like to help us begin our discussion?
Do you have questions for me about what I think about the question of merging, or?
Yeah, I do. I think that we need to talk about the. I don't want to take too much time myself right now, but you've been there since the beginning of the Budget Advisory Committee. This is its second year. There have definitely been significant challenges. I think that the board formed the committee because we would like to have as much public input and transparency as possible with our budget, because it's been a rough couple of years. We faced cuts and more cuts. Now we have unplanned costs because of the pandemic. and probably increased operational costs going forward, because the new normal is going to look different for schools. And we have, the strong possibility of greatly reduced state funding. And so I think in this atmosphere, we're not saying that we don't need input or help on the budget. We need that more than ever. But I think that we're having this discussion about trying to restructure our process or give the Budget Advisory Committee, more of a clear mission, and so that we can move forward more efficiently. So any views that you have on where we've been and where we're going, I think would be a great place to start.
Right. I mean, I think bearing in mind where the budget advisory came from is important, as you touched on. As you'll recall, that this is actually not the first budget advisory iteration of the Budget Advisory Committee. The first one was not board appointed. It was just a more informal advisory committee. And then this is the second iteration of the board appointed version. But back in the beginning, when the idea first came out, it was in the midst of a lot of community outcry about the possibility of budget cuts and how those would look and whether there was transparency and input. And that is where it came from. And I think that continues to be important. And trying to do things like just do things like community surveys. Don't do the same things the committee can do, and left some gaps. So, and I think the committee has had kind of, the role has changed, and I think become a little bit less clear as time has gone on. And I feel we can be useful if we have our purpose is clear. So we're probably having a budget advisory committee is the most useful when there are specific questions coming to us. But when it's sort of more for us to formulate thoughts, it can feel like you're sort of generating that in parallel to what's happening, the actual budget planning that's happening. And that seems less useful. So I guess my thought, and by the way, just to be clear, I'm speaking for myself. I haven't consulted with the other committee members on this. So yeah, I think to the extent the questions and tasks put before the committee, whether it's in this form or another form, the more those can be fairly specific and informed. Because the other thing that's come up time and again is where we're addressing a question, but we actually don't have the information we need to do so in a meaningful way. So that's something historically that was a problem for us. So I think when it's more specific, here's a question we have. What do we think? What information would the community want to understand this? That kind of thing. We can be helpful in those kinds of questions. Is that helpful? That's my personal perspective.
Sure, that's a good start. I think that one thing that you alluded to, the information is worth going into a little bit more. I think that there's a district commitment to share financial information first with the board, and then roll it out to the larger circle, and then next to any advisory committees. I think that's just their general practice. And because the financial information is so often obtained just very very soon before the board meeting where it's presented, it cut short the window of opportunity to have the Budget Advisory Committee really delve into it. Although last year I think the committee met several times, every week for a set of weeks to prepare something quite quickly to bring to the board. I think that this year the committee has met monthly, which gives it a different, it's just on a different track than when the CBO gets information about the governor's budget from Sacramento, and then prepares a budget that or an interim report that's then delivered to the board. So I think that it's
that
not
is an important, yeah. The difference in the meeting time was pretty drastic. We were meeting, in fact, we met more than once a week for a little bit of time, but that's because we were convened with a need to make a report with a very, very short window of time. And a lot of all but maybe 3 of us weren't even familiar with the district budget at all at the starting point. So people needed to be informed about where the shortfalls were coming from and all this basic information before they could even get into the questions that we needed to answer. But you're right that it did allow for us to engage in things more than when we're meeting monthly, for sure, because the timing is part of the problem, and the situation changes a lot. So it's difficult if the questions before the committee are highly specific, like, do we prefer this or that kind of, do we think the community would prefer this or that kind of model? What do we think the pros and cons are of very specific budget proposals? Those really do need to be at the last minute because the feeders into those questions change all the time. So you would be at one meeting and the numbers look one way and then they look a different way the next time. So we'd often be engaging with a particular thing, but then it's moot by the time we met again. So in that sense, but there are also broader questions and questions about how to communicate with the community and how to balance values and that sort of thing that are less time sensitive, I suppose.
Committee meetings. I do think that the fact that it was at a sort of more of a parallel timeline with the district's budget process rather than an intersecting process. I mean, we've talked about this in the committee quite a bit, made it really challenging to know how those processes were going to intersect at some point, so that the Budget Advisory Committee's role of educating and reflecting a set of parents, staff, and other perspectives wasn't able to feed into the budget process in a timely way, which I think was frustrating both for committee members and for the board. So I think that figuring out how to align those processes so that the Budget Advisory Committee is actually informing our decisions is important going forward. Somebody, it may have been Kim, had suggested one way to do that is to have the Budget Advisory Committee itself determine what that process looks like, and have, obviously in coordination with district staff, but I think if we want this committee to inform the board's decisions, then this committee needs to sort of take the reins to decide what it looks like to create a budget that is that helps the board understand what the community is looking for. One of the challenges of making especially budget cuts in Albany is we're a small community and people want to feel very engaged, and I think it's been challenging to figure out how to build that engagement into the process. And what ends up happening is a proposal that's made in a board meeting, the board doesn't have the context to know, well, what are the ramifications of this decision, and then what is the sort of second best scenario? If we don't make this cut, what's going to get cut instead? And in that vein, I think the most useful thing the Budget Advisory Committee was able to do, even though they weren't satisfied with how this went, was
I think we
that
should.
what
Sarah,
I think.
you froze for a second. Can you like rewind yourself about 15 seconds?
Sure. I think having that one role that I found useful was creating that sort of priority list and ranking different options for achieving a balanced budget. And I think even if we don't have full information about the governor's budget and our funding situation, that's still useful to have. If we have a set of decisions we can make, in an ideal world, we don't end up having to implement all of those. But if the board is left having to just vote up or down on one strategy, we're not bringing in all of that engagement. So I guess to wrap up, I think having the Budget Advisory Committee help us set this process, and we have an unusual time frame going into the next 6 or 9 months, having them design what the process looks like and having them rank a set of budget reductions so that we understand if we're deciding not to implement reduction number 1, we move down the list, and so that the board has in front of it a list of options that have been sort of vetted through another body.
Can I clarify, Sarah, in that proposal, would you be imagining that the superintendent's office would present the committee with the possibilities under consideration? Because that is what happened with the ranked possibilities. So here's the universe of things that the superintendent's office is considering. Although it was somewhat murkier, there were other suggestions that committee members brought in from the community, but those typically did not, they were never assigned dollar values, so they could not be ranked. So only things with dollar values tied to them were ultimately ranked. So all the things that ended up on the list really were from that. And so I guess whether that's going to work is going to depend on whether that's something that works for staff as well, because that's not something the Budget Advisory Committee can completely lead. The problem with the Budget Advisory Committee sort of leading is we need to know what's possible and under consideration in order to be able to do that sort of work. So that's kind of what I was saying is if there are questions that the board or the superintendent's office has, could you prioritize these things? The Budget Advisory Committee can engage that and certainly can be helpful in thinking through a timeline of, okay, if these possibilities are given to the committee at this date, then we would need to meet this many times and work out a report or that sort of thing. But really, staff's comfort with providing that at an early stage is pretty important, because without that information, what the Budget Advisory Committee is going to do is going to be fairly vague and may or may not connect with reality. And some of the problems that come up with this are related to us being a small district. So some of the proposals, a lot of the committee members know the individual people and that are behind those proposed cuts. It can be difficult. We did receive letters from individual staff members in the past that were going to be affected by cuts that were ranked in that report. So that is something that is complicated. It's also the case that the vast majority of what the district could do to deal with the budget is in the area of contract negotiation. And that is not something we can we could theoretically say something like, and we have, like, bear this in mind when negotiating contracts, but we don't have any involvement in that. So that's another complexity, because most of our budget is personnel, and a lot of how much we spend on benefits and pay is determined by contract negotiations, which the budget advisory committee cannot really influence. So those, and also that fact makes it a complicated area to discuss in the committee. But I guess mainly it's just whether I think whatever the process is, it has to be something where the district office and is comfortable with the process, because we would need to be able to actually discuss, like, get the information, accurate, timely information, and discuss it about those options.
Yeah, just respond to the clarification you asked for. So I think obviously it's not helpful for the committee to spend time debating options that will never be proposed and are not possible. And I think there was a little bit of circularity in that process in the recent year. So I do think but I think there's a little room for some back and forth of the district, as we did in the previous superintendent's tenure, giving you a list and saying, these are all the options, or the committee coming back to staff and saying, well, we thought of a couple of other things, and being able to quickly determine whether those are within the purview or not. And I think that's where having the committee sort of develop the architecture of the process would be helpful. You're still dependent on staff for information, but it would build in some of the timelines that the committee spent a lot of time trying to figure out this recent year. So knowing, for example, well, here's when we want to arrive at the full list of possible reductions on this date in order for us to rank them by this date, because the staff are going to present a proposal to the board on this date. It's not that staff isn't capable of coming up with that time frame. It's just that I think the committee understands the level of engagement that the community wants to have with the budget, and so you're well positioned to figure out how to build those milestones in of presentations to the community or forums about different possibilities. And I say all this in part because I think there's a lot of urgency to figuring this out soon, both because of the magnitude of possible fiscal impacts. And I think another important thing to know going into the process is there's going to be a lot of lack of certainty until the school year starts, possibly, about what kind of fiscal situation we're in. And I don't think we can allow that uncertainty to stop us from getting this process started. So that's why I think the process is so important, because if we wait until we know exactly how much we have to cut, it will be too late to have any kind of real process.
I'd like to make a comment, Kim.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, so I know this is review and discussion, and I'm assuming it's going to come back for review and action at some point. It would be very helpful for me if I could get kind of a sense of what staff is recommending. It would be very helpful for me in my decision-making process, what staff thinks should be our next steps.
Actually, I'd like to hear more from staff right now.
Yeah,
there was a question on this agenda item, and the board members were sent a little short update that one area where we are engaging with the community, and we've been doing this for several years, and we sort of have a process worked out, is the LCAP. And so if staff would like to talk about any proposal about sort of piggybacking budget input onto the LCAP process, the board should hear that.
Excuse me, before we get into that, I just had a quick question for clarification on the budget advisory. The budget advisory committee is made up of all community members. Was the original purpose, you talked about it a little bit, but I just wanted to get, was the original purpose to give the community an opportunity for more input other than like, you know, coming to the board meetings like right when stuff is being voted on, but giving the community an opportunity to be more engaged prior to that process?
It's not just community members. Jessica, as president, do you want to answer that about the makeup of the committee?
Sure. So the committee includes teachers, administrators, parents of all the different schools, and in theory, a community at large member as well, and one student and high school student. And there is also like a few vacant positions. We've never really had anyone from the other union, but there's a position for it. So, but it's meant to be fairly inclusive.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Does that answer, like, just as who it is? And then, yeah, it was, we were meant to, you know, review and provide advice or responses to the superintendent's office and the board.
Got it. And then this allows, because there's teachers there and also other staff, and this allows for a deeper discussion. You guys are able to kind of like dig into the weeds a little bit. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to get more clarification.
Yeah, it's definitely not just parents, and the discussions are very, very different than it would be because there's a lot of things we certainly wouldn't understand if there weren't teachers and other staff members on the committee.
Okay, I want to.
President Trutain?
Yes, please
I want to
go
go on
ahead.
and weigh in. I think there was a question, a very fair question, but I think it starts back with us getting clarification and being less cloudy around really grappling and addressing the issue of what's the purpose of the BAC, the big why. Why do we have it? And if the purpose is to have an engaging process, we have an LCAP that spells out that same purpose, if that's the purpose of the BAC. So I think before weighing in, I think it's important for us to spend a moment with responding to the issue or question, if you will, of what is the purpose, the why of the BAC. And I think that's a good starting point for a wonderful conversation about how best to use the BAC.
So do you want to express your view on that, or do other staff members want to say what they would like to hear from the BAC, or are you sending that to the trustees?
Oh no, this is a board appointed committee, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I think it's important to hear or have a point of reference of the why, the purpose. And I think that is the starting point for getting clarity and having crystal clear direction of how best to use the BAC where it can best benefit the district and our students. For example, when I was thinking and reflecting and grappling with what the purpose is, it dawned on me that I can't come up with the purpose because I didn't create the committee. But if the purpose is, for example, to have an engaging process, well, we have a legislative process in the LCAP that requires the district in its budget process around program and services to be inclusive and collaborative with both your parents, your community, your teachers, your classified. And although it's not super fine-tuned yet, we can fine-tune it. And so you have a vehicle for that. And if the purpose is the BAC to do that as well, you have a duplication of services and hence lots of frustration. But if the purpose is something else, it shouldn't be a mystery. It should be something that's transparent that we all know. And I think that would reduce the frustration and increase the productivity, because we will all know where we're going in terms of the direction, because the purpose and the big why is clear with the BAC. And so it begins there. And I think that's how we get, once we get there, we're on first base and we can start doing some things. But absent of having a purpose and answering the big why question, we left trying to figure it out because of those two basic elements have not been answered.
So this is open to anyone. Board, the board voted on convening the Budget Advisory Committee. If people want to share what they hope to get back from the committee, it would be helpful. So please go ahead.
If I could jump in, one of the main purposes I thought was for us to get feedback from the broader community about the budget. That's important for us to try to involve all stakeholders. So that was one reason and a primary reason to set up the committee. I don't know if Jessica wants to speak to, she has, in terms of addressing who the representatives are. But when I saw the response today, it really kind of flipped my mind around in terms of, well, that's true. LCAP has a unique way of, and has worked on it now for several years, in a way of reaching out, not only to a representative group of parents, teachers, and staff, but really reach out to everybody. And I'd like if the Assistant Superintendent Williams could speak to the process that LCAP uses in reaching out to the community, to the broader community.
Sure. So there, as you mentioned, there are sort of two phases. So we form a committee, an LCAP advisory committee, and that has been made up in the past couple of years of representatives, so parents from each of our sites. We try also to include a parent that represents our District English Learner Advisory Committee, so DLAC. We try to include a parent that represents our Latinx group. We tried, this year actually, we invited Jessica Cross, who represented the Budget Advisory Committee, or at least was a voice from the Budget Advisory Committee. So we try to pull in as many representative voices as possible to that committee, excuse me. We include a student also on that advisory committee, and we meet monthly. And our work, unfortunately, was halted this year because of school closures. But in our meetings, we are looking sort of primarily at our goals, actions, and services. We're taking a look at how we have performed relative to our goals, actions, and services in the previous year, and then look at ways to make adjustments. So phase 2 of this process, which we have sort of modified over the past couple of years, is to solicit input from all of our community members. We do it in 2 ways. One way is to engage stakeholders sort of in their meeting settings, so attending DLAC meetings, attending Latinx meetings, attending Black Parent Engagement meetings. And then also we have a survey that goes out to all of the Albany Unified community, and we get responses back that way. Our first year we got a sort of a smaller number of responses. Last year we found we had more responses in the hundreds, and then we take that feedback back to the advisory committee and sort of chew on, sort of what are the major themes that are coming up in relation to the needs of our students and how might we make adjustments to the LCAP based on that feedback. I will say that our LCAP planning process, so it's a fixed 3-year planning cycle. So my years of being involved have really been around sort of revisions to the LCAP. This year we were really excited because we were starting our planning cycle over. And so that will be postponed for a little time because of school closures. And so sort of that first year is a little different than the revision years, because in the revision years, certainly you can make changes, but you're not looking to sort of generate a whole new document. And so when we resume our process, that's where we will be in the late fall.
Yeah, I got a question, Kim.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, maybe staff can help me answer this. So the LCAP committee, is it like limited to how many people can participate, or is it open to as many folks as would like to join?
We don't have a limitation. Actually, sometimes we struggle to get representatives from all of the sites, but the committee certainly could be, it could be expanded. More people could be involved, yeah.
So anybody who would like to be part of the LCAP discussion is able to?
Yeah, they're not closed meetings, they're open meetings, so anybody can come and be a part of the conversation. We do have an established committee that meets, and that committee is made up of teachers and also parents and site administrators. So Ms. Ritchie has been a member of, I think, every LCAP committee but one since its inception. So last year she stepped up, but this year we got her back. So, but certainly those are open meetings that anybody could attend. And we do push that survey out, and we do attend the meetings to get input from as many folks as possible in our community.
And if I could just add that there's students involved, and I'm also a representative to the LCAP. So as a board member too, we have representation.
Let me add too, in addition to that, the LCAP process, it requires and adheres to the requirements here in Albany, where we have to be very intentional about getting input from key folks, stakeholders throughout our community, including our student groups. And so the LCAP is pretty extensive in that way, and it's legislative, so that we make sure we have the input from all groups and voices in the community. And so that's important to know.
Can I just add something? Having served on both the Budget Advisory Committee and the LCAP committee, I do see the two as fairly different, not only in their current iteration, but I would. Well, let me put it this way: if things like that priority list that we generated in our earlier phase of Budget Advisory Committee are of interest to the board, the LCAP committee process would not be suitable to producing that. It might be more suitable to producing sort of modest feedback on, like, because with the LCAP, there's a document you're sort of responding to, and the surveys have kind of values, but there's not anything really akin to, would you prefer to have no electives at the middle school or big classes? There's really nothing like that. And to be able to engage that, it would need to be kind of different. That's just because of the amount of time it meets and the way that it moves through the development of the document.
In addition to that, the LCAP has purpose and it's crystal clear and it's data driven. And so you use the data to make collective decisions, both qualitative and quantitative data. And the focus is student achievement aligned with the district-wide focus. And so the question becomes, consistently with the LCAP budget process, is the way we currently using our funds making a difference in the area of student achievement and closing a student achievement gap? And because it has a purpose, it's very narrow and focused, and it must use data to inform the decision. And so whether we have both groups or not, it's critically important that both groups have a purpose, one that's transparent and not a mystery. And so whatever we do with the BAC, I would highly encourage us to start with purpose and the big why.
I had a question for Jessica. Jessica, can you think of ways in which the BAC would be more able to do the job? Because you expressed some frustration about the, on one hand, you have some budget items you want to talk about. On the other hand, by the time they either get your recommendations get to, or even before that, the school district has all these changes going on. So it's like you're not in the same time zone as the school district in terms of finances and impacts, et cetera. And I'm just wondering, is there a way for the BAC to change the way it meets or something in order to, to be more in sync with the board and when we have to make decisions?
Certainly, but I think it comes back to what Dr. Wells is bringing up is, what does the board want from us? If the board wants from us highly specific sort of feedback, so there's a couple of pieces that the Budget Advisory Committee has been kind of asked to weigh in on in past. And the one that sort of like as came up recently, here's a proposal for, that most recent round of budget cuts we were talking about before the pandemic. And what was our committee's response? Well, we didn't really have time to, we only heard about the proposal or learned of the proposal without a few days before the board was going to vote on it. So we really couldn't review it and prepare a formal report. But if it's that sort of thing, I think we could certainly talk about a timeline that would better serve being able to create a response. But the thing is, I think there are complexities around whether that's what everybody wants us to be doing. That type of highly specific weighing in on things like, are we going to cut intervention teachers? You know what I mean? So if we're doing that, I could certainly, and I'm sure other Budget Advisory Committee members could certainly have ideas about like developing a schedule and a process for getting feedback, but it all hinges on getting the information about what that universe of possibilities is in a timely way and in a way that district staff is comfortable with providing to a committee like ours when it often involves people's jobs. So there's that piece. Then there's also, because if we don't have the information, we really can't provide anything specific. That's, I guess, what I've heard to say. Like, and I've heard different things about whether that's appropriate for our committee. That's, the board appointed us, and I'd like the board to decide whether they want us to be weighing in on that type of thing. So that's one piece. The other piece is how to kind of help communicate with the community about what's going on in the budget. And that's somewhat separate. And because that can be a little bit broader, might not run into the exact same issues. And we could certainly do better, I think, at developing a process to be helpful there. But what I would like, and I think probably everyone on the BAC, I'm guessing, would like to know what the board wants. Do they want us to just sort of weigh in on, oh, here's the type of information, this would be a good way to get information out to the community? Or do they actually want us to hash out like these issues about proposed cuts? Because they're pretty different kinds of tasks. And structurally for the committee, they'd be different too. And I guess that's kind of what I was getting at with the LCAP process. And where it wouldn't serve would be something like getting the committee to render some sort of opinion or feedback on something like that proposal. But it would be more useful for sort of things that are broader and longer term, a similar process. I don't know about the merging, because your LCAP meetings would have to be vastly longer, because the information is really different that the budget committee looks at than what the LCAP committee looks at. So
I'll, well, first of all, as in my role, I'm forced to say that we're a few minutes after the time that we were supposed to adjourn, and we have another discussion item after this. This is a really important discussion, and so I hope that we'll be able to sort of wind it up. This is just a discussion at this point, but at a meeting soon, we'll need to have some sort of proposal that that the board can vote on. I think that I'll try to summarize a little bit. I may be wrong, and please correct me if your impression is very different than mine. I think that merging the Budget Advisory Committee with the LCAP would certainly help out in terms of a greater number of groups and parents being involved. The LCAP is a really robust process, and so it has a deep reach into our community. What would probably come out of it, though, would be just like statements of what the community values. Like, I think that's what rises to the top in the LCAP process, is the things that our community values the most and wants to put forward. I haven't thought all about the logistics of merging and how much budget work could be done, but I think it would be sort of like it would be sort of what to keep, not what to cut. At least as I'm thinking about it now. From where we started with Trustee Hinckley's comments, there I felt a great sense of urgency. And I know that Sarah keeps up with statewide budget news pretty closely. And we've all heard that probably the COLA is going to be cut. I think there's been news that districts are being asked to look at a scenario where the cost of living adjustment, the COLA, it actually becomes zero for next year, and the year after that, which would be like 0.8 million loss each year, and that would be on top of the increased of the losses that we've already had from the pandemic. And so when Sarah was talking, I was thinking about that and how we're going to have to pass a budget in June that's going to be so full of unknowns that the budget isn't really going to be much more than a placeholder, and that only when more of the financial information becomes available to the state over the summer and then is conveyed to the districts, that in August and September we're going to be asked to do this all over again and create a new budget. And I think that sorry, I feel like I'm putting words in Sarah's mouth, but I think that Trustee Hinckley is concerned about having community input on these budget cycles, the June one and the one that's going to happen August, September, and how we would even how we would make that happen leading up to those dates, like now when we're in shutdown, and then in the fall where we might still be in shutdown, or anyhow when it would be over the vacation. How we would have community engagement in those budget cycles is very hard to imagine. So can anybody who wants to sum up their impressions, or if anybody has an idea for specific proposals that could be brought back to the board, if you could voice those now.
I'd like to see that combination. I think it'd be great. I think it would allow staff to be able to share the information to a wider group of people, but then also only having to do that one time versus having to, two separate. And then there's going to be even more input, more information that they're able to use in order to help the board, make as informed decision as possible. So I think maybe that could be, part of what we bring back.
Thank you.
Happen.
I wanted to know, and Jesse, do you have the time to be able to maybe reach out to several of the members on your committee and come up with some kind of more focused proposal in terms of what you guys, after this last in particular, and you from prior years, of how do you see, what do you think are the best components of a BAC that could really help the district in guiding us and advising us about necessary budget first priorities? That's always nice to have, and then dealing with specific cuts. Do you feel that you and other members of the committee could articulate a proposal that, based on now your experiences, that might really refine and make the committee much more meaningful? And if so, I'm really interested in seeing how we can get even more input from the community, and maybe finding out from LCAP the process that they use in terms of a survey out to the community, that kind of thing, that you are also guided by more community input as well.
Well, one thing I will say, I'm happy to be involved. I mean, we'd have to have it be agendized, and because I can't just email back and forth with them. We're also subject to the Brown Act, so we can't do that unless a meeting has been called. We can have, I think, certainly the staff could write to everyone on the committee and they can communicate back to staff, but we can't start a offline conversation amongst ourselves. But one thing I just would urge everyone to bear in mind when we're talking about sort of what to keep, or an LCAP-like process that's about values, I think those things are worthwhile. And in the past, the Budget Advisory Committee has developed some of that. And I think going back to the community and getting some of that can be helpful. But what I find is really important and is really hard, unless you've engaged with the details, is it's not about what to keep, it's about what to cut. And it has to be, because we're at the point where everything that's going to get cut is going to hurt students and is going to make education worse. And I hate to be that blunt, but so every single thing you say, oh, here's what we value, every single thing that staff is going to be able to propose is going to violate some of that. So the real difficulty is this or that. Is, do you like to have, do you think this is more critical, or is that is more critical? What could you live with more? And so that is, that's the difficult part. And so I think if it's more just sort of, we value this, we value that, this fits the LCAP, this doesn't, that's great. And I think people can do that and add that. But in order to get into that second piece, that hard piece, you need to engage the details. Because, people come to the meeting, every single one of these will have a constituency, and people will be passionate and they'll be right. But some of it's going to go. So it's the input on that that's hard.
Thank you, Ms. Cross. I appreciate that. That's the reality. Board, are you comfortable ending this discussion now and moving on? Or is there, and we also need a motion to extend the meeting, please? Or are there any closing comments on this item?
I move that we extend the meeting 15 minutes.
Okay,
I'll
to
second that.
9:48. And I'll go ahead and use normal procedure for that. I will second that motion. Board, all in favor of extending the meeting for another 15 minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, so the Budget Advisory Committee item will come back at a future meeting. And now we're on to item 13-2, Board of Education self-evaluation. I also want to hand this item to Vice President Durand, who prepared this. Oh, Clementina, you may need to unmute.
Thank you. We have talked about this, and it's late already in this phenomenal year, but this is very important that we do an evaluation, and it's even more important that we do a meaningful evaluation. And so meaningful in the sense that it impacts on us, that it does give us in our own information about what might we want to improve, what's working really good, that kind of thing. And so a part of me says, in order to sort of look at that, we actually need more than just self-input, self-evaluation. We really need to hear from others. The staff, the district office staff, and in a way, school staff too. How do they view if we're being effective in our role as school board members? And so, but because of the lateness of the year, we really do need to focus. I think the process is too late to reach out unless people really feel strongly about that. But in doing this, I came across several instruments or templates that we could use for this self-evaluation. And you did, I believe, receive copies of them, or did they not? President Tutain, everybody received the copies, right?
Yes, we got copies.
Oh, okay, great. And hopefully you had an opportunity to kind of look at them. Once again, there were 3 of them that were sent out to you. And personally, it's like I felt, oh, I could pull from this one and I could pull from that one. And maybe that's something we'd like to do. And in terms of my thinking more about it as well, was it for this year, maybe we need to make it tighter, meaning much fewer items than you see on any of these. Maybe we could sort of work on it ourselves, or kind of do the process the way we did for the superintendent's evaluation, where 2 of us took several of these of templates and we pulled together what we thought might be appropriate, and then we came back to the board, and then the board looked at it and gave further input, and we somehow came to a finalized product. And so I'm suggesting that possibly we could go that route, unless there's other ideas out there that would be efficient and more helpful. So given that, I'd like to ask the board your opinions about this. How do you feel? Do you feel that this is a possibility that we could work with, say, the 3 templates we have, and either 2 of us, or if we kind of each want to give our own feedback about how this could work? Because we're looking at having to do this evaluation Well, it would be nice to have it at our first June meeting done so that the second meeting, we could really look at the results and do some reflection on it.
Yeah, I have a comment.
Okay,
Please,
please.
Whoever is controlling the meeting, if you could scroll down to the third template, that's the one I'd like to talk about. Thank you very much. If you could actually go back to that, just up one more screen, yeah, with the 4 batteries, the colored batteries. Yeah, when I went to the California School Board Association training, this was one of the ones that they not necessarily suggested, but it was an option. Even though it's an awful lot of questions, I like it because all of the board members will respond, and the ones that would really stand out would be the red batteries. And I think those would be the ones that then we could really jump into and discuss those in depth. So without really getting into it too much, I did look at all 3 of them, and thank you for sending them, Clementina. This is the one that I'm interested in. And for one of the reasons I said, if you kind of look at the example from the other one, a lot of them came out in the blue-green area. So overall, the board as a whole thought they were doing pretty well on those. But when you see the yellow, and especially the red batteries, those were areas of some concern. So that's just my input. Thank you.
And Jacob, if I could just ask you a follow-up question, which is, looking at it, do you think it's that entire template we should use? Or do you think we should shorten it for this year?
That's something the board could discuss. I mean, there is 58 questions. So on the surface, it seems like a lot, but you just kind of give a ranking. I think it was from 1 through 4. And then, like I was saying, I think for the example on this one, there was maybe 4 or 5 areas that really stood out that the board thought that they needed more work on. So we could limit the 58 and make it less, but if you're trying to get this done by June, I would suggest we just take one of these 3 templates. It doesn't have to be this one, but to try to get into all 3 of them and then try to take certain areas from those 3 and then create a brand new one, especially if the scoring systems are different. I don't know if that's going to be able to be done by June.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead, President Trutain. You can take over now.
I don't know if I need to take over, but I just wanted to say my opinion was exactly aligned with Jacob's. I don't think that there's time, and looking at the board governance calendar, I'm not sure when, whether we're going to be able to. We might need to get this done before June because we have the superintendent's evaluation to do in June. And so I was really hoping we could do this in May, which would mean bringing something back at the next meeting on action and then sending it out and having our reflection and results at the second May meeting. So I think we need to just choose one of these. They all looked great. I'm perfectly fine with the CSBA one here that Trustee Clark likes, and and get it done. Let's look at ourselves and score it.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing about the CSBA evaluation. The only thing I wanted to add was, does it have to be just the board completing the evaluation? In order for us to, truly get better and improve, I'd like the input of the other people that are working around us. And so, I'd like to extend maybe even a shorter version of the evaluation to the other members of the district, and even maybe some members of the community, just to get their input and their thoughts on how things are going.
I think we could certainly entertain that. I got a message from Trustee Hinckley that she was actually kicked off the Zoom meeting and earlier, and I believe she's now rejoined us. So Trustee Hinckley, if you have some comment about the self-evaluation tools.
Yeah, I think I'm back on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I also like the stoplight one, the CSBA version. I think it would be interesting to figure out how to get some feedback, like Brian suggests, from others, or you know, I know time is of the essence, so maybe we focus on evaluating ourselves in May and then talk subsequently about how we would go about getting feedback from some other core group of observers. But I like this, the last one, the CSBA one.
I had a question. Is this something that student board members are doing as well, or is this for voting board members?
Oh, you've got to do it. Student board members, you need to evaluate the board just as any other board member. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. That makes sense. And then I had a comment. I did really like the CSBA one, and I like the visuals of it. I think a lot of people work in a color-coded frame of mind, and so I liked it for that reason. But I also really like the first one because there was a section where it asks, I do this, and then it has the prompts and, you know, always, often, rarely, etc. And I liked that part because it was it was individual to the self, and you kind of, sometimes it's easier to reflect on one person rather than reflecting on a whole group of people. And so I really like that part, and I don't know if we would be able to take that or just to create our own version of evaluating ourselves and not just the entire board, because I think sometimes it can be a lot easier to find, quite honestly, to find faults within ourselves versus finding faults within a whole group of people.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay, so I think that we can try to work that in, Michaela, when we do our board evaluation and when we discuss that. We can try to do some reflecting on that aspect. And then I think that it sounds like to me that there's a consensus to use one of these tools and not try to create a new one, and that the majority was happy with the CSBA, the third tool. So I will ask, I will ask if we can bring that back as an action item at our next meeting. And then I do need to return briefly to item 13-1. Because Sarah informed me via text that she was kicked out of the meeting, and she did have a final comment about the role and purpose of the Budget Advisory Committee. And so before we adjourn this meeting, I'd like to give her a chance to make that comment. And then we can quickly look at the upcoming items for May.
Sure, thank you. I think my internet died somehow. I'm on the phone. So I just wanted to read the Budget Advisory Committee purpose that's on the agenda meetings for the committee, which is to create strategies to achieve and maintain a balanced district budget. And I think there was a process at board meetings and committee meetings to come up with that. So that might sort of elucidate the different purpose that we originally gave it compared to something like the LCAP committee. I also just wanted to respond to I think somebody had asked Jessica about them coming up with what they thought would be useful. And I think it's tremendously useful to hear what she has to say, but I think she also said early in the meeting that it really depends what the board wants and what staff is able and willing to sort of provide in terms of information. So I think putting it on the budget committee themselves to come up with how they're going to operate hasn't led yet to a sort of successful process, in part because the board itself needs to guide what we want, and because they haven't been able to get information in a timely way. So I just want to caution sort of putting it all back on the committee to come up with that. And I missed a couple minutes of discussion. So maybe that isn't where the discussion ended, but I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. I think that this item was difficult, and we may struggle with it again at our next meeting. But in the end, I'm sure we will come out with a more defined and a better process. I'm not sure where we're going to end up, but please, everybody, continue to think about what you want from our Budget Advisory Committee and how that could best be attained. Okay, and then before—
President Chastain, I have a
Oh,
question.
sure, go ahead.
I'm wondering, would it be helpful if I and my team met with a couple board members, Sarah and one other, and a couple of BAC members, so that we can come back with a proposal that might be helpful and may help to guide the discussion, since the review and action is at our next meeting, I believe May 12th, opposed to not having anything and picking up where we left off. I think it might be helpful if we came with a proposal based on some input. Would the board like to go that route, or another?
I'd like to hear quickly from each board member on whether they would like to have a couple of board members meet with district staff and also some members of the BAC, right? Was that your proposal, Frank?
It was a question. I was wondering, would that be helpful? And then take that input and come up with a proposal for the board to grapple with and make a vote, yeah or nay, or an alternative. We're just trying to be helpful. I think the whole point is.
Yeah, that's not my decision. That'll be for the— Can each board member speak quickly and say whether they think that would be useful?
I like that idea.
Do I see Clementina, Sarah, Jacob? What do you think of that idea?
Sure. In light that we don't have any other suggestion, that is one way of pulling the district office together with the BAC and a couple of us. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, I'd like to say something on that.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. I don't think it's fair to really put it on the Budget Advisory Committee to figure out what their task is. This was the committee that was set up by the board, and I think we owe it to them what we are hoping to get out of the committee. So if staff and other board members think it would be helpful for a couple of board members to meet with a couple of the Budget Advisory Committee members, I'm all for that. But it really does come back to us, the board, and I believe this was the old board, but we did create this committee, and I think we owe it to them to be really clear about what we would like from them.
Yes.
I like—
well said. Go ahead, Sarah.
I think this is a good idea. I think it would be helpful to anchor it in a very specific process for 2020, 2021, a lot of 20, so that whatever we bring back to the board is not a sort of hypothetical, here's the role of the Budget Advisory Committee, but a proposal that incorporates it into the process the board is going to be undertaking in in the next budget cycle.
Okay, great. So the answer is yes, Superintendent Wells. The board would like your idea. Please meet with a couple of board members, some of your staff, BAC, and so that we could bring back some sort of proposal to the board, and then we'll debate it again.
Yeah, and I want to make the request because I think it's really important if we can have Sarah be a part of this, because she has some really good ideas about how to do this. So I really, really want Sarah to be a part of this. Sorry to single her out, but she has a lot of wonderful ideas around the BAC.
Trustee Hinckley, are you willing?
Sure. Yep.
Great. Okay. Okay, then thank you for allowing me to return. I didn't think that was fair, since Sarah lost her internet, for her not to be able to comment on that item. And I appreciate where we are now, being able to close that item off with a concrete suggestion. And now that brings us to upcoming.
I'm sorry, President Trutain, you need the request was to have a second board member on that little meeting. So can you, I mean, however you want to do that.
Oh, yeah, thank you for this. Is there another board member who would like to take that second slot?
Sounds like Clementina wants to do it.
Jake, I thought I could be the default person. If somebody else really wants to do it, by all means.
I'd like to see Jacob on there. I think he was a member of the board that put it together. So I think his input would be valuable.
Here.
I'm willing. I'm not volunteering, but I'm willing.
Okay. So Jacob, does that mean that you're, because I heard Clementina also indicating that she might be willing. So
I didn't want to jump in front of her, so if she can have first place.
No, by all means, here we are. By all means, Jacob, please go for it.
If nobody else wants to do it, I'd be more than happy to do it.
Great, you got the job.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. This has been a difficult discussion, and I'm really glad that we have two board members willing to try to get us to a concrete plan. Okay. And now I would like to move to our item 14, upcoming agenda items. Ms. Shen, could you share that slide? Thank you. We have 4 meetings left in this very peculiar school year. We've got a lot going on in May. The update for all of the construction programs across the district. We need to hear more about enrollment. I'm sure there's going to be some construction contracts coming our way. We're entertaining the idea of an AUSD climate action plan that should dovetail with the City of Albany's climate action plan, but is yet our own. And we have a very important workshop on student achievement, Closing the Gap Part A. We have our board self-evaluation and some items about recruiting and hiring in the district. And we want to have a school closure update monthly. And the one in May will focus on the end of year events and maybe hint toward any plans for summer school, or if not, it should have some options for summer learning. In June, we do the evaluation of the superintendent. We have to work on our budget. We have another student achievement workshop, and there were other items that I didn't have room for on the slide. So we're going to have a busy end of the school year. Okay. And
one of the things we have to do is a report that's now required by the state on how we adapted to the school closures, which I think is a formal report that has to be approved by the board, I assume in June. Maybe that's one of the more coming.
Yeah, I think that I believe Assistant Superintendent Williams is going to be bringing that item. And I also wanted to mention that we have our special workshop on race and equity on May 5th. So we're not.
Can I make a request for one of the school closure updates in May focus on how we're handling IEPs and special education?
Yes, I think you just did. So let's make a note. Let's make a note and to make sure that that is one of the items discussed. Thank you.
I'd also like to say that there's going to be a virtual rally for Schools and Communities First, which is something that we endorsed as a board. And the event is called Collecting on Our Future Communities Over Corporations. It's going to be on Thursday, May 7th from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. And so I'm just putting that out there for anybody who wants to go. I know that they're looking for people right now just because it's a difficult time to get people to attend, things like that. So that's available if people would like to attend.
Thank you, Board Member Weinstein. I didn't know about that. I'm very interested.
I just wanted to ask also if could Mr. Borrego, as part of his the construction update, provide some information about the construction that has been completed and any money saving things there? For example, the solar panels at the annex, and that's been up for a while now. And if he has any information about that to bring some positivity to all this as well, and maybe some money saving things we might have.
That would be a ray of sunshine. I think we can definitely ask about that. All of the new construction is being done with the sustainability goal of being net zero ready. And so after everything is built, we certainly ought to see some cost savings happening. Okay, and with that, I will thank the board very much. We're getting better at these Zoom meetings. Thank you for your participation, and this meeting is now adjourned.
All right, bye everybody. Stay safe.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.